What is going on, my poker friends? Welcome to another edition of the Poker Breakdown, where we help you get better at the game of poker by studying hands sent in from the community and breaking down complex situations into easier thought processes that you can digest to help you level up your poker game. Today, we've got a really interesting ICM spot from one of our team pros, Mika Richards, and I'm titling this one, ICM stands for I Call, Mate. Let's take a look. The first thing I want to point out is that with a global hand history, we cannot see who any of the opponents are. So the goal of this video is not to say what Mika should have done, because she has a lot of additional information that we're not privy to, but to teach you guys what I would think about in a situation like this without any information to help you be better educated when you get into similar spots. It folds to under the gun +2, who opens to 2 big blinds, and we now have a decision to make. Now, Mika tells us that at this point in the tournament, there's about $15,000 up top. We are 15th place with 60 people remaining, and we are well in the money with just 5% of the field left. So the first thing we're going to want to do is take a look at what our opponent's opening range is supposed to look like. And this is a hot mess. All this yellow you see is actually a limping range, and we're not really going to see any limping in these types of tournaments at this position. The reason you see it from a theory perspective is so that we can have some limp calls when our opponents don't shove on us, but in real life, most players are going to pretty much open all of these hands, and most of their shoves are going to come from kind of these pocket pairs here where they don't really want to play post flop. But there's one critical piece of information we need to factor into our opponent's opening range. Can you figure out what it is? It's the stack depth of the blinds. This player can never open and fold to a jam from the small blind or the big blind because it's way too good of a price to call. When we go back and look at the player's opening range, is he really going to open hands like 10-8 suited, 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, king 10 off, king jack off, queen jack off, and then have to call off for 1/3 of his stack when the big blind shoves? That's not a very comfortable place for most players to be, which means they're going to tighten up the bottom of their opening range fairly considerably, which makes this range more like an EP opening range, or even tighter than an EP opening range than it does a MP opening range. Now, what makes this spot even more fun is we actually have 4 options here. We can fold, we can call, we can raise, and we can jam. And to illustrate how gross all these options can feel, let's just go through them one by one. Folding a hand like ace jack of hearts this deep in a tournament feels like a really bad decision. If we call here, we put ourselves at risk of getting squeezed by the player behind us who almost has us covered. If we raise here and our opponent goes all in, how good do we really feel about our ace jack of hearts? And if we go all in and the player behind us wakes up with a monster like ace king or aces or kings or queens, now we're in ICM hell as we virtually bust the tournament after being 15 out of 60. So in order to unpack this mess, let's go look at what we're supposed to do in a perfect world in theory, and then see if we can extrapolate some simpler thought processes and ways to understand the situation should it come up again in the future. If we look up hijack versus EP open 15 big blinds effective, we can just see that all we have is a jamming range here, and ace jack suited is clearly in that jamming range, so we just need to go all in here. That's it, end of the episode, we're done, right? So if we go to 30 big blinds effective and we look at hijack versus a middle position open, we can see that we have no 30 big blind shoves. But this is based on us having all 30 big blind stacks in the hand, and there's only one 30 big blind stack behind us. So if we go take a look at the button, which would only have 2 stacks behind us, we can see that we have a tiny little bit of shoving here. But we also have to factor in that our opponent is playing a little bit tighter than normal. So if we actually look at a button versus an EP open, we can see that even here, with only 2 players left to act behind, we have no shoves at 30 big blinds because of how tight our opponent's range is. So I think we can safely eliminate shoving as an option here. That just leaves us with raising or flatting. And if we go back and look at our response versus a tight open, you can see that a lot of our 3-bet bluffs are just slightly tighter than our opponent's opening range here on the suited and offsuit side. And then of course we have the top of range pure 3-bets for value. But a lot of these strong suited hands over here are just flatting. And this is a result of the fact that these hands have really good equity and play well post flop, but our opponent's opening range is really tight, so we have to proceed carefully, and we really don't want to get 4-bet off these hands. But there's one more factor in play here that makes this hand incredibly cool, somewhat unique, and really is going to push us towards a preferred answer for this situation. When we flat here, there is going to be a small percentage of the time that this player in the cutoff is going to squeeze, and that's not going to be ultimately ideal for us. But because he is the only player who can truly squeeze and put maximum pressure on us, it's a risk I'm going to be willing to take in this situation. Also, if we have player info on this player and we know him to be extremely aggressive or not aggressive, that can factor in too. However, when we flat here in the hijack and it folds around to the button or the big blind, they get an opportunity to do what's called reopening the action. And because their stacks are on the shorter side, their reopen to the action is inconsequential. Because if it gets 3-bet here on the button, or it gets 3-bet here in the big blind, and it folds around to us, we're gonna have pot odds to call, so it doesn't matter. However, what this allows us to do is get additional information based on how the original raiser reacts to the action being reopened. For example, if the button or big blind shove and the original raiser for some reason folds, we're gonna know that they were at bottom of range, and we're gonna get that information for the cost of 2 big blinds instead of raising to 6 big blinds. However, if they jam, that is also valuable information that we can then decide whether we want to use as a justification to call or a justification to fold. But you have to ask yourself the question here, which of his ranges are looser? Option A, we flat, the big blind jams, he rejams as a squeeze and we call, or option B, we 3-bet, it folds around, he 4-bet shoves. Which range would we rather be against? And the answer is, we would rather be against the squeeze range. When the short stack goes all in, the original raiser has incentive to jam because there's fold equity if they can push us out of the flop, which allows them to shove a wider part of their range and try to get heads up with the shorter stack. However, when our opponent opens and then we 3-bet, now our opponent is in a situation where if they do jam, they are jamming with no perceived fold equity because we're going to have 3-to-1 odds to call, and it's very unlikely that we're 3-bet folding at this sizing against this stack depth. So with all the information factored in based on the information we have, I think the best option here is to flat with a semi-strong hand over raising or jamming or folding. But with a little bit more information, I may just be persuaded to move in one direction or the other. As played, Mika does decide to 3-bet. It folds to the big blind who shoves. The original raiser shoves. Mika gets it in basically a flip situation, but unfortunately she cannot get there for a really huge stack. And that's it for this really cool spot. As always, if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps support the channel and also gets you notifications when new videos go live. And make sure you drop a line in the comments and tell us how you would have played this messy spot. That's it for me, Rob Gardner. Make sure you follow those socials down below. Hit me up if you have a hand you want reviewed, or maybe you're looking for private coaching or a community for group study. We've got all the details down in the description below. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again soon.